I've spoken here quite a few times, and some of you may know it's very difficult to see with that bright light. Some of you may know I'm retiring next year, and so I thought I'd indulge myself slightly with looking backwards a little bit before I look at today and look forward. So I've been reflecting on legacy issues, because I'm about to be the legacy, and the NDA is about dealing with legacy. And my colleagues have very kindly looked through and found some things from the past, if I can make this work. So this is 30 years ago of what some thin young chap looked like. I didn't have quite that orange hair. I think that's a slight trick of the camera. But I was obviously thinner, more youthful in those days. There were other things going on in that sort of timescale. And just to show the sorts of things that the industry was focused on, this is deadly serious. There was a style guide for men issued by BNFL. The 1987 style guide, and I find myself now looking at what people are wearing, because in it there's a matrix of suits, shirts and ties as to what goes together and what doesn't, and what it tells you about your personality. Plain suit, plain shirt, plain tie, boring. Patterned suit, patterned shirt, patterned tie, racy, a bit unpredictable, not trustworthy. Somewhere in the middle. Bruce a bit more at the racy end, me a bit more at the stable end. But very much looking at that's what was seemed to be important in those days. If you go back to that timescale, really interestingly, there wasn't a women's style guide. And although I haven't got a picture, sadly there was in BNFL News a Girl of the Month, which shows where we were 30 years ago and hopefully how things are moving as we go forward. So just a little bit of light-hearted looking back to start with. But what else was happening 30 years ago? Well, 30 years ago at Sellafield, Thorpe was the biggest construction site in Europe. Where are we now? Thorpe is just about to complete its mission. It's reprocessed thousands of tons of spent fuel. It's done it safely and effectively, and we'll be putting it to bed in the next couple of years. If you look back to other areas, 30 years ago, Sizewell B was at the end of its planning and consultation phase. It was about to get into construction, huge construction project. Where are we today? New build is just on the horizon. Sizewell B, of course, was going to be the first of a fleet of reactors. Sadly, it was only one of a kind. Hopefully, through Hinkley, through Horizon, through New Gen, we'll see the next phase of a real rebuild program. There's lots of change. Things like technology. The standard way of operating was the black phone on your desk connected to a wire. These days, everything is digital, everything is quick. That brings all sorts of opportunities, but it brings all sorts of risks. Security is a big issue for us in the digital age. And I've mentioned the Girl of the Month. If you look forward 30 years, we now have women in nuclear. Rather different to what it was 30 years ago. Huge step forwards. Really looking at making sure we're more inclusive. We have greater equality, greater opportunities for people. I think there's a long way to go in that area, but I really think we've made steps going forward. And whilst there's been a lot of change in that period of time, a lot of things have stayed constant. The focus on nuclear safety, absolutely paramount to all of us who work in the industry. And I think the industry in the UK particularly has got a really excellent nuclear safety record because of the dedication of the people who work in it, the science and engineering expertise and dedication there, and the working in partnership. None of the projects that have been delivered over the last 30 years or so, certainly not Thorpe or Sizewell B, were delivered by individual organisations. They're a result of a partnership of a huge number of organisations working together, bringing the skills of everybody together in partnership to try and make sure that we can deliver things that could not be delivered by a single entity on their own. So if we look at the NDA itself for a moment, what does the NDA do? We're a strategic authority. We publish strategies, plans, we get the right people in place, the right contracts in place, incentivisations, we get funding in place, and we monitor performance. We're about delivering through others. I've said many times, the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority doesn't do any nuclear decommissioning. We encourage and bring together people to do it on our behalf. And if you look back over the 30 years again, 30 years ago, decommissioning was a twinkling in the eye. No one was really thinking about it at all. 10 years ago, when the NDA came on the scene, there was decommissioning going on, but it was a bit piecemeal. And now we have a coherent decommissioning program across the entire estate. It can always be improved, and it is being improved, but at least we've got a coherent arrangement in place. We've got a vibrant supply chain. We're spending about £1.8 billion a year in our supply chain. That's double what we were spending 10 years ago. And we've got a real push on innovation. Some great examples of innovation, but still not enough. And I think we need to get that mix of the licensed companies who are responsible on the sites pulling innovation in, as well as the supply chain trying to push innovation in. I think certainly the pull side is one that I'm particularly keen to work upon. But just a quick look at progress on the ground, just to give a couple of examples of where things are progressing. So if I take Sellafield, just a couple of examples, there are many, but real tangible progress. You'll appreciate the legacy ponds and silos, the big ugly 4 plants at Sellafield. We have in sight for the first time now the real opportunity of a couple of years' time to be retrieving waste from all of those. We're already retrieving from the ponds. This is one of the silos. Since the photograph was taken, which is shield doors on the side of a silo where we're going to cut holes in the wall and start retrieving waste. This is work being done by Bechtel Cavendish Partnership under Sellafield Limited. Really successful, and the last of those 6 doors is now up. The other silo, the wet silo, a before and after photograph. The after one doesn't quite show it. This is the operating floor of the Magnux Wharf storage silo. It now has the first of the 350-ton silo emptying plant machines being built by Ansaldo NES, again on behalf of Sellafield Limited, in place, starting to be commissioned. So real tangible steps on the road to progress. Across the Magnix estate, there are huge numbers of examples I could give. I picked just one. Bradwell, the reactor's all clad up, the 18 volts emptied, ready to move towards care and maintenance. This will be the first reactor put into care and maintenance in a quiescent state, ready to leave it and effectively walk away, leave it without anybody operating on it. Dounreay, one of the biggest hazards on the site, on the estate in the NDA, interestingly, was sodium-potassium coolant on the Dounreay fast reactor, all removed. A huge hazard reduction, risk reduction. It was a big program of moving what's called exotic materials from Dounreay to Sellafield for consolidation purposes with security benefits. And last but by no means least, often unsung heroes, the low-level waste repository up in West Cumbria, who don't just dispose of waste, I mean, that is their core business, but over the years, they've really worked on trying to make sure they divert waste, open up different waste treatment routes with the supply chain. And in so doing, we've moved from having only 5% of waste going to alternate routes rather than disposal, to now 85% is either recycled, reused, or disposed of in simpler ways. So real progress across the piece. And I'd say it's only done with the support of the supply chain. We have 3,000 supply chain companies supporting the NDA estate. About 25% of those are small, medium enterprises. We have a target to try and get to 31% by the end of this Parliament. That's a specific target set by government. We're working hard on freeing up our intellectual property to try and make sure it's more accessible to people, more usable to people. We're working with our Shared Services Alliance to try and bring economies of scale together. We're doing a huge amount of work on skills, the development of skills, both the physical assets, training facilities, but also the human assets, nuclear graduates, apprentices, a whole range of activities. And a lot of work on research and development. We get about £85 million worth of R&D in the NDA estate per year, heavily leveraged from the money we put in and the money we get through Innovate UK and other funding agencies. So an awful lot going on. And just to summarise, just where we are and where we are going forward, I think we're in really exciting times. I said this a couple of years ago, and I say it again today. If you look at the new build opportunities, the existing fleet opportunities, and the decommissioning opportunities, which I think are a continuum through in terms of activities, huge amounts of work going on. The NDA estate alone, we've got about 40 major projects coming forward over the next decade, about £3 billion worth of capital spend, as well as some of the other activities that are going on. So a huge amount going on. We're working hard internationally. We've got people working overseas. We've got offices overseas, links overseas, trying to aid UK companies leverage the real expertise that we've got in the UK to make sure that we can get maximum benefit to UK companies and the UK economy as a whole as part of the industrial strategy that Bruce touched on before. And just in final summary, I feel really proud to have been a very small part of this industry for significantly over 30 years now. It's been absolutely great working with it. 30 years ago, the future looked really positive. And I have to say, where I stand today, I think the future looks really positive again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. Come and answer some questions. If you have a question for John, please raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. We've got a question here.
It's David.
Thank you very much. Sterling work, by the way, getting the microphones to the audience.
Thanks very much, John. Very interesting. And David Fleer from Doonray Stakeholders Group. And obviously you talked about Doonray, but one of the things you didn't talk about is the development of the National Nuclear Archive in Caithness, which is very well accepted, a £21 million project. It's going to take archives from the whole of Britain and 25 permanent jobs. This is really a good legacy because we're a closure in Caithness, and for the NDA to actually give us this legacy project, we're really very happy about it.
Thank you, David. I mean, I think it's a great example of us being able to find a real need. I mean, we have a need for a nuclear archive, and to find a location where we think it can provide the maximum benefit, linking in with some of the Scottish Archive. And I know you were able to cut the first sod for the archive when it started. I'm looking forward to going and seeing it in its completed state. But it's great to do something to put something back into the communities in which we operate.
Thank you. This is fitting in nicely with your retrospective theme, isn't it? Thank you for the retrospective. A question from me. From your time at the NDA, for you, what has been the biggest challenge? Well, apart from obviously the selection of a non-patent suit and a non-patent shirt with a non-patent tie, what has been the biggest challenge during your time at the NDA? And then as you leave them, what do you think will be the biggest challenge coming up?
I think the biggest challenge, well, probably when the NDA started, was to establish what is the role of the NDA. I wasn't there at the start, but I was there relatively early on. I think we have now established the role of the NDA, and I think, importantly, we've now got, I believe, the right strategies, the right plans, the right delivery partners, the right contractual arrangements in place. And we can now focus on two real issues for me over the years going forward. One is delivery. We've done all the planning, the competing, etc., etc. We've now got to focus on driving forward on progress, driving out costs, driving up efficiencies. And then the second one is trying to find the strategic opportunities that can make a real tangible difference. So we want to do what we're doing better, but also we want to find better things to do. So, putting waste in a box more efficiently is great, but is there a different way of avoiding the box in the first place? And I think, I hear all the time real ideas of things we can do differently, and I'm really keen that we push those forward. So that's the big area of challenge that I see going forward.
We're going to mention that word innovation again then, aren't we?
We are.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Any more questions for John? Yes, we have a question here. A microphone is racing towards you. Thank you very much. What's your question?
Thank you. Adrian Bull from the National Nuclear Laboratory. John, you just talked about doing things differently, and you talked in your presentation about learning from experience. As you look back over your career, what's the one thing you would have done differently if you could do it again?
Oh dear. This is probably the wrong answer, but I was offered a PhD on heat pumps when I was leaving university, and I've always had a soft spot for heat pumps, so maybe I'd have done something like that. But I'm not sure I've done anything differently, Adrian, to be honest. I mean, I've had a ball in this, and I think the one thing I was taught, or told quite early on, a bit of advice I was given early on, which I've passed on to a few other people, is don't focus on what you do want to do next. Focus on what you don't want to do next. Because if you focus on what you do want to do, A, you're not in complete control, and B, the chances are you might be disappointed. Whereas if you say, I definitely don't want to do that, you're leaving open all these other opportunities and things come forward. I don't think I'd change a whole lot. I'm a happy man.
Thank you very much. That's an interesting topic to focus on the things you don't want to do and get those done.
I think it was great advice.
Brave
great
move.
advice.
Yeah. Lovely. Any more questions for John? They've all gone shy now.
Absolutely.
We're talking in the next session, to sort of move it on a bit, but with you instead of our panel. We're talking about international opportunities. Yep. So what role do you think the NDA can play in helping UK firms make the right contacts to bid for and win work overseas?
Well, I think there's two or three things we can do. So we have links with counterpart organisations around the world, organisations that are a bit like us in the United States, in continental Europe, in the Far East, all over the place. So we've got some established contacts that might be of use. We've got long-standing relationships in some markets. So some in continental Europe, particularly in Japan, to a lesser extent in some of the other Asian countries. And we are working closely with UK companies, particularly in Japan, of introducing people to, almost as a marriage broker, someone with an issue and someone with a potential solution. And I think the other thing is making sure we can leverage the experience from the UK. So I'm often asked, I was in Japan recently, I was in China a little bit earlier, you get asked about the work that's going on some of our sites and who's actually doing it. So people are checking, company X has said it's doing something, is it actually doing something? So, I'm able to speak and reaffirm that people are doing things. And there's some great things that go on. So I think it's in those main areas.
So lots of pairing people up and getting people to talk to each other who may not have talked before?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at, say, in Japan particularly, we work very closely with the embassy, we work very closely with the Department of International Trade, and a number of UK companies are using our Japan office as a vehicle to move in. I mean, we're not in partnership, and we're certainly not selling a service, the NDA. But if there's a role we can play to help UK industry as part of the growth and export drive, then we'll absolutely do that.
So looking back then, just over the last year, instead of your whole career, busy year, is this the year where you think, that was such a good one, I'm quite happy now to walk away and leave?
I think it's been a tricky year, I think it'd be fair to say. We've faced our challenges in the NDA.
But do you feel like you've got done this year what you needed to get done?
Largely so. I mean, I think there's some big steps that we made. I mean, I think the change of model at Sellafield that was implemented, really been implemented from the 1st of April this year, I think has been pivotal. I think we've now got bespoke arrangements in place, different arrangements at each of the different licence companies. I think that's been a really key step forward. We faced some real challenges this year. I hope we'll get through those final challenges in the early parts of next year. My absolute aim is to make sure that those are all squared off before I leave the field of play. Glad
to hear it. Thank you very much for coming in. Enjoy your retirement and wearing all the patterned suits you could ever want to.
You don't want to... I'm going to grow a ponytail. Okay.
Thank you very much, John Clarke.